Hello, in this video, I'm going to share with you the code for the game world, and then we're going to run the code, and then we're going to take a look at GitHub. So yeah, real quick, we're looking at our GitHub workflow. So we have our Rust test quality. So this is where we actually run tests like installing toolchain, caching cargo artifacts, and formatting the cargo checks, and some lint check, and integrate unit and integration tests, and then installing cargo LLVM coverage, and we're running our coverage. And similarly for Rust YAML, we're pretty much just running the project. If we look at our source folder, right, we have our entities folder, so our entity builder and our entity itself, so like actual player, you could say. So we have the name, position, and movement and combat that this entity factory returns, and from strategies, name, movement, and actual combat strategy itself. Right, so whatever object is passed from strategies creates that entity, typically usually via the menu selected. So when we look at it later, the relevant strategy will be passed with the object with those properties and values. So if we look at similarly for this factory design pattern, we have our enemy factory, right? So creating movement or creating combat, or the entity factory, which uses those public modules, which use those public rates. So the movement strategy and the combat strategy. For the enemy factory and the player factory. So yeah, two different players utilized into one entity. So and we also have the observers for observing the game, right? And so login states or whatever state we're in. So we have our game state subject and our logger observer, and our observer and actual subject, and obviously module here. Similarly for the states, we have the combat and the which has our game context events, actual state we're in while we're playing, even if we're in idle state, right? And so if we look at similarly for systems, combat, and movement, and for utils as well, are helpers. And then we have our lib.rs, which uses those public modules, which are then imported within main. So within main.rs, most importantly, when we run like cargo run, we are effectively updating our game context with the idle state. Right, so this is the first state that we're currently in, and whatever state we're currently in, we'll be updating the context, by attaching the observer with the logger observer, as we mentioned earlier. And we are creating our player factory and our enemy factory, and then referencing creating the player and enemy, making sure that's immutable, referencing the entity factory, because so that way then any value can be passed to this choose entity method, and at runtime, and we then pass the player and the enemy as mutable variables. So current state can be updated and to the game session, and the game session continues until it's until it's quit. So yeah, the choose entity, as you can see, the player will be prompted to choose how to build his character, either factory generated or custom or builder, and then either selecting 1, 2, or 3, and we build that specific. We use that specific design pattern. And for example, if the user chooses, choose entity via builder, right? So we will basically use this entity builder, which will build the strategy with the name, movement, command, and with the name, position. So passing the actual object with these properties and values, and which is actually called within main.rs here. So when we create almost a new instance of that build, of what we actually expect. And so for the actual combat itself, you'll notice that we are creating our combat straight. So either move both combat and combat command, and pausing the combat and ending the game, or using the last command. And we're using that specific trait, and the user either selects 1, 2, or 3, right, and so on. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. And so if I run the game real quick, so cargo run, as you can see, we can prompt it to choose how we want to build. So we'll say 3 and player, and say 2.5. And for the movement strategy, we could say 2 as well. Again, we'll say 2.5, and just say 1 for aggressive damage modifier, and we'll say 2.5. And for the enemy, we'll say the default factory, and give them a name, and then we can start the game. So when we start the game, we can see that we have our game starting here, and with the color, utilizing our color here. And yeah, so when we initiate combat, as you can see, we have attacked at 25, and so we keep initiating combat. As you can see, the score is continuing and is increasing. Similarly, when we move the player as well, the coordinates And so we can pause the game and we can resume the game. When we resume the game, we can also undo. You can see the score is now going down, or the turn is now going down, and then we can keep going down. That's what I'm doing. Our states, and yeah, we can then end the game with 4 and return to the game, and then 0 to exit. And yeah, if we look at GitHub real quick, you can see that our tests are passing and our coverage is pretty good. And we have branches, 12 tags, and 12 releases, and 60 bits. And if we look at our actions here, so you'll see that they are passing. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.